Okay. Welcome, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. Welcome, fellow Toastmasters and guests. It's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to the Cascade Speakeasy 4061 Toastmasters Club. I would like to first call on our Sergeant at Arms, Mr. Rob Tidd, to lead us through the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam President. If everyone would please mute themselves and focus on my voice and my screen and repeat along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Back to you, Madam President. And you are muted.
Thank you, Rob, for that. I have the pleasure next to introduce our Toastmaster of the day, Pat Whitfield.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another beautiful evening. I'm so happy that the days are getting longer. At 5:30, it's not pitch black, and sometimes we get to see a lovely sunset, which enhances all of our lives, I think. I would like to know, do we have any other guests? Dawn is with us again. Dawn, do you still qualify as a guest?
So I wonder if, I don't want to take any time, but I need to quickly ask somebody about membership at some point. I've tried to do it online and it doesn't work that way, I see.
Eric, you're muted.
You can send me an email. We'll put it in the chat and then I'll get you over an application form. My pleasure.
Okay, that's helpful and thank you very much. Then we have an opportunity for the joke of the day, and I brought one just in case, and Eric said he has one, and since we don't have a major speaker, Rob has got one too.
I've done jokes 3 times in a row, so you two take it on.
Okay, well, I'll share my joke and then I will defer to Rob. So this one's called Phobia. A man went to a psychiatrist for his phobia. Doc, he said, I've got trouble. Every time I get into bed, I think there's somebody under it. I get under the bed. I think there's somebody on top of it. Top, under. You got to help me. I'm going crazy. Just put yourself in my hands for 2 years, said the shrink. Come to me 3 times a week and I'll cure your fears. Well, how much do you charge? $100 per visit. Well, 6 months later, the doctor met the man on the street. Obviously, nothing had happened in that interim. Why didn't you ever come to see me again? Asked the psychiatrist. For $100 a visit? A bartender cured me for $10. Well, is that so? How? He told me to cut the legs off the bed. So there's my joke. All right, Rob, what do you have to share with us?
An American lawyer invited a friend from Czechoslovakia to stay with him in his mountain cabin. Early in the morning, the lawyer and his Czech friend went out to pick berries for their morning breakfast. As they were picking blueberries, along came 2 big bears, a male and a female. The lawyer, seeing the 2 bears, quickly climbed a tree. His Czech friend wasn't so lucky, and the male bear caught him and swallowed him whole. The lawyer drove his car to town as fast as he could to get a policeman. The policeman took his gun and ran to the berry patch with the lawyer. Sure enough, the 2 bears were still there. He's in that one, pointed the lawyer, pointing at the male bear. The policeman looked at the bears, took careful aim with his gun, and shot the female bear. What did you do that for? Shouted the lawyer. I said he was in the other bear. Exactly, answered the policeman. Would you believe a lawyer who told you that the check was in the mail?
Well, on that happy note, it's my pleasure to introduce our general evaluator, Eric Stepper. Eric, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Toastmaster. I am the general evaluator, and I'm going to measure the meeting from stem to stern, but I have a great team to help me accomplish this task. We have no speaker and we have no evaluator, so we're probably going to endure some more jokes. In the interim, my first team meter is timer, and Steve is going to do the timing tonight. And Steve, what would that entail?
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. When we are polishing our speaking skills, we find that our audience appreciates our succinct delivery of our message and a desire not to have us run on to the point of putting them to sleep. So our speeches have timing definitions, which in a normal meeting, we would have an organized speech that would run 5 to 7 minutes. And the 5-minute mark would see a green object indicating that they're going strong. At 6 minutes, a yellow one, and at 7 minutes, a red one indicating time to wrap up. I'll find my yellow, green, red items here in a moment. I was a little sidetracked. Tonight, of course, we'll be busy with table topics, which run 1 to 2 minutes, and we will see the appropriate colors at 1 minute, 1:30, and 2 minutes. And if we had a evaluator, it would be a 2 to 3 minute time frame, and they would see green at 2, yellow at 2:30, and red at 3. I will keep track of our table topics tonight, since that's where our focus will be, and I'll report at the end of the meeting. Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Steve. I know I asked you to do this at the last second, so I appreciate that. Tonight, our grammarian will be Christina Stepper.
Thank you. Tonight, as grammarian, I will be listening for exceptional use of the English language, as well as any misuse of the English language that I notice. I'll keep track of those things and share them when called upon to do so. I also get to choose a word of the day, which I am posting in the chat.
Christina, you're muted.
Just then. The word of the day is antecedent. It is posted in the chat box. It means preceding or prior. And apparently, if you put something in the chat box, it mutes you automatically, just so you know. Here's the word antecedent used in a sentence. The storylines for the 4 Star Wars prequel movies are antecedent to the original 1977 release. Antecedent. Use it often in speaking of Back to the Future. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Also subbing in tonight is our awe counter, and our awe counter will be Barbara. Barbara, what does an awe counter do?
First, they unmute themselves. Greetings, Toastmasters, fellow Toastmasters, and guests. The purpose of the awe counter is to note words and sounds that are used as a crutch or pause filler by anyone who speaks. During the meeting, I will listen for overused words, including and, well, but, my favorite that I use often, so, and you know. I will also listen for filler sounds, including ah, And I will also note when a speaker repeats a word or phrase, such as I, or this means. At the end of the meeting, I will report the number of times that each speaker used these expressions when called upon. Thank you.
At this time, I will turn the meeting back over to our Toastmaster, Pat.
Normally, speakers are antecedent to table topics, but since we have no one signed up for speakers tonight, it is my pleasure to turn this over to our table topics master for the evening, Lloyd Smith. Lloyd, we can't wait to hear what our topics are going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I can't wait either, since I didn't remember until just a short while ago that I was table topics master, but don't worry, you won't be able to tell that I'm faking it. Since we have relatively small crowd and we have a relatively long period of time, why don't we try to add a minute to the table topics? Is that agreeable to everybody? Go with 2 to 3 as opposed to 1 to 2. So give it a shot, see what happens, okay? So, because if we don't, we'll just have to go around twice and same difference. Well, back to the future. I picked this topic after Rob sent an email asking if I had a theme in mind, since I was going to be the table topics master. And at that moment, a guy on TV was talking about the movie, the Back to the Future movie, and I think there were 2 sequels to it. Anyway, so I just typed that in, and I didn't think anything more of it until, as I say, a few minutes ago. But it's, I think, a pretty serious topic to think about a little bit. You hear a lot about people talking about regrets and wishes. And in fact, people seem to talk about those more than they talk about present achievements, which is a little odd since, here we are in the present. Anyway, this first one's for you, Rob. If you could go back to any time in history, where would it, what time would that be, and why that particular time?
Thank you for that question, Lloyd. As an antecedent to my response, I wanted to say that I've thought about that quite often. What period of time would really be intriguing to be a part of? I think because I feel I'm quite patriotic, I would have liked to have been alive and able to experience life in the 1700s when we became a nation. I believe that our nation, as young as it is one of the greatest nations in the world. I feel that our people are treated well, we treat each other well, we're all equal under the eyes of our government and God. I feel that this is the best country in the world. It would truly be interesting to me to have lived during the time of the Declaration of Independence and experienced that time that was so precious in our country's history. I really would have liked to have met George Washington and some of our founding fathers. Knowing what I know today, wouldn't it have been cool to really share some of the things that I know in our present lives with people that were from that time period? I've always thought how interesting that would be. It's kind of along the same lines of the things I experienced or didn't have when I was a kid. For example, last night we were having dinner with the family and we were talking about cell phones and computers. We didn't have any of that when I was a kid. My mother would say, be home by nightfall. She wouldn't worry about us. We'd be out all day, trooping around in the desert or climbing the mountains, and she never worried about us. People today, they can't do much without their cell phone and being on that cell phone to stay in contact with people on a regular basis. We didn't have that opportunity when I was a young man. And my parents never thought twice about it. I think they do now, but it's because we have all these luxuries that we didn't have as a kid. I digress. Getting back to the 1700s, I think that there were a lot of things that happened in forming this country that I would really like to have shared with them back then. One of those things, having lived on Indian reservations as a kid, I would have liked to have shared with them more about how we can amalgamate everyone in our country so that we didn't put them on reservations and treat them as second-class citizens. Unfortunately, that happened back early in the life of our country. They're wonderful people. They're no different than you and I. I wish they had been treated more fairly than what happened back in the 1700s and the 1800s. I don't have anything more. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of history. Thank you for your time. Back to you, Mr. Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Rob. It's always interesting to hear people talk about where they would go in history. When I talk to my students about that, they usually have places they'd want to go, and I'd say, but suppose you could go there, but you couldn't come back. Would you pick the same time? And almost always the answer was no. You know, they wanted to see gladiator shows, but they didn't want to live when in that time period. Who can blame them? Okay, let's see here. Don, would you like to try one of these?
Oh, sure.
Okay, I promise it's going to be a
Hard.
easily doable one.
Okay.
Okay, if you could travel back and talk to your 15-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself from your perspective now that you wish you had had when you were 15? I kind of garbled that up, but do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, that's not easy, but because it wasn't easy being 15. So let's think about that a minute. I don't know. I think one thing I might say is, you know how everybody always says, just wait till you're older? Believe it, because you really do change a lot. You'll change a lot. And you have strong feelings, strong opinions about things right now. And that's appropriate to where you're at. But I'm like a grandmother to you now, 15-year-old Dawn. And I can tell you, you'll be in a lot of different places. Things will change a lot. Those feelings, those opinions, and your mind's going to get wider and wider all the time. You'll be able to accept a lot of things you can't accept now. You'll understand people from different perspectives much better as you get older. And by the time you're as old as me, you'll begin to realize that you really don't know anything after all. And so you really will start to relax at that point. It's actually pretty cool being older, I think. You can look forward to that. Don't worry about how, you see these old people and, oh, we don't look too good, right? But don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. The wrinkles aren't going to bother you all that much. And, you'll start getting some aches and pains. But hey, the wisdom really, the wisdom you start to have is really well worth all the aches and pains. You're going to like yourself better. You're going to like other people better. So you have a lot to look forward to. And I only made it to the yellow card, but I really don't have much more to say. So I'm antecedent to a couple more minutes here to go, but okay, that's fine. Have fun, 15-year-old.
Thank you. That was very good, I thought. One basic rule of speaking that you understand that a lot of people don't is just because you think it's short, that doesn't mean you should keep going. Frequently, short and good is better than long and crappy. Okay.
Well, you know how 15-year-olds are.
Yeah, right, right. And I like the way you dealt with the adversity of having a cat staring into your face while you were speaking.
Sorry about that.
No, well, no, it wasn't a problem for us, but I know how it is when the cat, focuses its gaze on you. Okay, let's get serious here. Sure. There's something called the time travel paradox. And what that is the notion that if you traveled backwards in time and either accidentally or deliberately changed something, you could alter everything in the world. I mean, you could alter human existence. In fact, there's a science fiction story by Arthur C. Clarke, one of the giants in science fiction, where he describes this scientist who develops a way to time travel. The guy knows about this paradox. He goes back to prehistoric times. He's very, very careful not to do anything that would alter something like, but when he comes back to his present, he realizes the world is very subtly different from what it was. And eventually a disease starts up and spreads and kills everybody. It turns out he had stepped on a bug, and that bug did not pollinate a plant, and that plant did not grow to feed an animal, and so on and so on. So he had altered human history by stepping on a bug. Now, the question is, and this one's for Eric. Eric, suppose you could go back in time and is there something important enough that you think would be worth altering or fixing? In other words, is there something you'd like to head off, even though it could have unknown effects when you come back to your present?
No, is that short enough?
Well, you might want to explain a little bit.
Here's an interesting thought that I can't get out of my head. It's like one of those thought worms. I never watched Back to the Future, and the people all around me thought it was a great show, and then Back to the Future 2 and all this stuff. And there's all these references in social media and books and things that they go back to it. But I was in a phase, it was back like when Jaws, I think Jaws was not even the first one, where they had Jaws and then Jaws 2, and they had Star Wars and Star Wars 2 and 3. And I was determined not to get caught into that trap and be told what to watch. And it was immature behavior. And my stepdaughter thought I was nuts. And she didn't get that, and she was going to rid me of it. So she said one weekend, she said, and she was probably about 16 or 17. And she said, we are going to watch all 3 Star Wars this weekend, and you're going to sit right here and watch it with me. And I said, I'm not going to do that, and she just insisted on that. And she was a very good child, and she got good grades, and she did all the things, and she wasn't any kind of an issue as far as discipline and those kinds of things. And so I said, all right, I'll do this one thing for you. So we sat there and we watched Star Wars, and it was an enjoyable weekend just because of watching her. I mean, I don't think I've watched Star Wars. I watched her watch Star Wars, which was quite entertaining. But I decided that if she wanted me to watch another movie, I would watch that with her. She picked out Twister probably 4, 5, 6 months later. She said, will you watch Twister with me? And I had no idea what the movie was. We watched Twister, and we probably watched it 5 times over the next month. And we could tell you what the line was coming next. He's looking at the map and he goes, what is this? The guy goes, well, I think it's like Bob's Road. I mean, we said that through, several years of life. We would just recount that to each other. So I think I totally deflected the question. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you, Lou.
Yeah, I don't remember asking about that, but it was a pretty good response. I got to admit.
I'm giving Dawn, the ability to alter stories and just showing her kind of an example of how that would look.
Yeah, the technical term is make stuff up, and it works sometimes. Okay, well, back to the serious questions. This one's for Christina, who I know will take it seriously, of course. One of the things that's interesting about the notion of going forward in time as opposed to backward is the idea that everything will be much more advanced in the future, mostly the distant future, than it is now. And every time somebody tells me that, I think of the novel The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. And Wells was a social critic in addition to being a writer. And in The Time Machine, this guy travels like 3,000 years into the future. A scientist invents the machine. And what he discovers, much to his horror, is that humanity is divided into two different species. And one species is descended from the upper class people of his days around the time of King Edward or so. And they got used to living a soft life supported by the work of the underclass. And so they become helpless. They just kind of sit around and sniff flowers and wait for the lower class to feed them. The lower class people, the upper class ones are called the Eloi. The lower class ones, the Morlocks, live underground where there's these huge factories. And they make food for the upper class people and bring it up to them. And then when they want to eat, they come to the surface and grab some of the upper class people and eat them. And so the book is about this guy's shock at learning that the far future didn't get better, it got worse. Okay, so what's your take on that, Christina? Do you think that humanity tends to advance without, what am I trying to say? Does progress ameliorate problems? Let's put it that way. Is it likely that things will keep getting better and better and better in general in the future? Or could there be a disaster?
There could definitely be a disaster in the future. Things have gotten progressively worse since the dawn of time. I can't imagine how we'd expect it to turn around unless I could take Eric's first question and go back to where anger first showed up and remove it from all of society or all of time. That would be a wonderful thing to do. It seems like the more technologically advanced we get, the more short-tempered we seem to also get, the more set in our ways, the more opinionated. Social media does have a great deal to do with that because it's pretty easy to blast things out there, to vomit opinions onto social media without any concern for how they will land. We need to go back to the days where you had to get out a piece of paper, write a note, sign your name, put it in an envelope, put your return address on it, put a stamp on it, take it to the post office, mail it, knowing that it would be a week before it got to where it was going, and that it would be 2 weeks before you got anything back in response. That gave everyone a lot more time to cool down before blasting their opinions. My concern with all this technology advance is that pretty soon we're not even going to need to type stuff. What's in our brain is just going to be out there on our computers or above our houses or something where anyone can know our deepest thoughts at any moment in time. And I suppose that the medical profession or whomever, psychologists will think that is just the bee's knees, that is possible. Then your doctor doesn't need to talk to you. Your doctor can just look at your thoughts. This world that we're in now, of course, would be antecedent to that. This would be considered the old days. At some point, it will be considered the old days. Frankly, I'm glad that I won't be here to experience the future. It's frightening to me. I want to go back. I'll go back with Rob, except I'd want air conditioning and motorized vehicles because I would have been a crabby pioneer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. Barb, Christina mentioned technology. I don't know how old all of you are, if you can remember this, but there used to be a comic strip called Dick Tracy. It was about this detective. And Tracy had all of these amazing technological things, and there would be little labels in the comic strip with arrows pointing to the gizmo that he had. One of them was a wrist radio, this astonishing thing where he could speak into this thing just as if it were an Apple Watch. And, you know, and everybody said, yeah, yeah, right. We will never live to see any of that. And here we are. So, Barbara, if you had the opportunity to either refine some existing technology or develop entirely new technology, what is it you'd like to see the future bring you?
Wow, that is a great question, Lloyd. Technology. It's so interesting. I would say as I've gotten older, I've moved away a little bit from technology in my everyday life. You know, I always enjoy the written word and book format. So what technology do I wish to see in the future? You know, I have to say the Apple Watch, I think, is amazing. I haven't bought one yet. I've been tempted several times because I'm horrible with scheduling. And when I don't know what my schedule is, and I know I have several meetings, I'm constantly looking at my phone. I thought, how easy would it be just to look at my watch to say, oh, I have a meeting in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Maybe it would keep me on track better for my reminders. But do I really want that all the time, 24/7 reminding me? So I haven't dived into the Apple Watch yet. I'd like my trips to places where I can't access any technology. Out in the woods. There's a wonderful lake. If anybody wants some advice up in near the Canadian border, you can go to. You can't. No phones. No access to anything. So, but what technology would I like to see? I would like to see technology be more readily available for everyone. And I say that as a librarian, of course, but also it should be more accessible. I think broadband internet access should be like water to your house and electricity, because no matter whether I want to step away from technology or not, it's how we access information. It's how we get information. It's how we are able to define and you know, the right from the wrong, or, you know, the truths. So I would say, if any technology moving forward is that broadband becomes free for everyone, and it's just like a water hookup to their house. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. it is interesting. I can't remember where I read this. It wasn't that long ago, but they said that if you have a smartphone that has roughly 500 times the computing power as the computer that was in the lunar lander that landed it on the moon, you know, and it costs a little less than the lunar lander as well. But so it goes, I guess. Okay, Pat, there's an old saying that history repeats itself. And there's an equally old saying, it's a Mark Twain quotation, that history doesn't repeat itself, but it very often rhymes. And do you think that's true? If you were to go some reasonable distance into the future, say like 100 years or so, or give or take, would those people be facing roughly the same types of challenges we're facing today? Or is it likely there'd be something entirely new that would be the big challenge? In other words, would history repeat itself or does it not?
I think fundamentally in human relations that history does repeat itself. I've been thinking a lot about that lately because I'm a child of the Second World War. I was a toddler during those years. I remember things like victory gardens and an uncle of mine who was in the Second World War and tragically was in a Jeep accident the day after VE Day, not killed in battle. And I'm fearing that we're on the brink of a third world war. So I think I would have to say that history does in fact repeat itself. And if I look at the last 100 years, that doesn't seem like very much time. If you think about the First World War, which was the war to end all wars, and then we got into the second, excuse me, the Second World War. I watched public television a lot. I watched the 5-week series on Franklin Roosevelt. It was interesting to me the strategies he used to keep us out of the war as he cleaned things up after the Depression and put in some social programs like Social Security and veterans benefits and things like that, and tried to make our society a little bit better. And we had Japan on one side, we had Germany on the other side. And where we are right now, we have Russia on one side and we have China on the other side. And that really is troubling me deeply. So when we're talking about human behavior and aggression and countries' desire for power, I think that goes on forever and ever. You can go clear back to the Roman Empire. You can go back to all the ancient civilizations and the wonderful ruins that we go to visit now. And you wonder what happened. And 9 times out of 10, the people were conquered. Look at the Maya and the Aztec. So I regretfully have to say, I think history does repeat itself. I could have addressed more positive things, but it's something that's been weighing on my mind for quite a while. So I got a chance to get it off my chest. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Steve, I've got a somewhat similar question for you, or they're sort of inspired by what Rob had to say as well. Back at the time of the American Revolution, where Rob wants to go, there were roughly 7 or 8 million people in the, well, they weren't the US, but the colonies that became the US. And it's pretty easy for almost anyone to name 20 or 30 just outstanding statesmen, you know, people on the level of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and James Madison and on and on and on like that. Well, today we have about 330 million people. Could you name 20 or 30 people equal to the founders? So the question is this: where did all of those people go? The people on the level of all of the founding fathers of the country? Shouldn't there be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them around, since there's so many more people now?
Wheel of time, Steve.
Yeah, I got it. Are you asking why do we not have intelligent people who continue to foster the higher level of quality of living and existence and intellect? Is that how you're asking that question?
Yeah, more like,
Philosophy?
yeah, that's the basic idea, but like, could you name somebody now who's on the level of, say, Thomas Jefferson? And probably not, almost no one can. So why aren't we developing or finding people like that now, I guess, is the question.
I like that question. Thank you. It strikes me that I have my lucid moments where I get deep and take time to think about things and kind of contemplate them and look for a deeper meaning. It makes me think of back in high school when I remember I went home for lunch with my friend's girlfriend one time and we're sitting there and I said, hey, have you ever thought about something? I can't remember what it was. She looked at me like with a deer in headlights. She goes, Steve, you're always going off on these odd little deep things that kind of screw up conversation for the majority of people, as it seems, because they're wanting to keep it on the surface. And I think one of the realities, and you may not totally buy into this, but I feel like the reason we don't see the deep intellectuals who take us onto another plane is because they don't have a TV show. They don't have the opportunity to go on and talk to us about philosophically substantive events or thoughts that take us to that next level. Who's the man that died recently? It's been actually less than recently. Carl Sagan. That's a kind of a guy that I think of like that, who really went deep on things about the universe and how that plays into who and what we are and how we go to those places that give us nuggets to enhance our lives and give us a little higher plane on which we can rest and hopefully cogitate and take to another level of personal growth. And I think part of the reality of that, particularly in the US, is that we love the idea of resting on our laurels. Somebody's done all the hard work and now we're at the point where we get to ride on their coattails and enjoy all that hard work that they did. And a few of us go there and garner a little bit of that depth, but most people just don't want to be bothered with it. They just want to surf the net and play video games. As close as I can get to answering that question for you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And Vicki, this last one's for you to round out the crew here. There's probably a human tendency to want something different from what we have. And we've heard a certain amount of that tonight, obviously. So the question for you is, this might sound like a little odd, but so be it. Are these the good old days, or are there better days to come, or were there better days in the past? Or I guess what I'm saying is, should we try to make the most out of what we have as opposed to wondering what we could have?
Thank you, Lloyd. I like this question in that I kind of roundabout thinking about that, and that with things that have happened for me, I've been thinking about enjoying the moment, because that's all we have currently is what's going on now. But I also have to have that little bit of hope, that spark, that there's more things, better things to come. I want that, technology is going to advance to a place where medical marvels happen. I think about with what is going on with my grandson who has spina bifida. Well, if he were born 100 years ago, he probably wouldn't be alive because of the things. They found his spina bifida during pregnancy.
So when he was born, they knew that he had to go into surgery right away. And I look forward to the day when they have the exoskeleton that he's going to be able to use and walk through that way. And just, I know that technology is going to be there. I wish it would happen faster sometimes, because I think about, television shows like when we started this conversation, Back to the Future. And when we got to the year of 2005 and we didn't have all these things that they had promised us in Back to the Future, people were upset. But then we think about the Jetsons, this, crazy cartoon of things that happen, or Dick Tracy with the watch. Several of us are wearing an Apple Watch now, and the Apple Watch technology is becoming amazing, because now if you fall, it knows to call 911 and get you help. We've had a person in our family who's a great family member who fell on his walk down to Pipus Market, was by himself, hit his head, and 911 was called. And there are bystanders that stayed with him and could have called, but had he been by himself, somebody would have gotten to him. And so I just know that let's enjoy the moments that we're having and living, because that's all we have right now. But also let's look to the future, because there are some great things to come. Back to you, Lloyd.
Okay, thank you, Vicki, and thanks everyone. This was pretty thought-provoking answers. I thought my questions could have been more thought-provoking, but that's the way it goes, I guess. So now I should probably figure out who to turn it back over to, because I've forgotten. Oh, it's Pat. Back to you, Pat, our Toastmaster.
Well, I won't be with you very long, because I, in turn, will be passing it to our general evaluator, Eric Stepper. Can't wait to hear what you have to say about it.
Thank you, Ms. Toastmaster. Wow, those were great questions, Lloyd, and just an example of being impromptu with the impromptus. Good job. And great answers, guys. This is the time where I'm going to call on my team. And our first team member is Steve. How are we doing our timing, Steve?
Thank you, Eric. I got to tell you that I think we should have a second Monday or whatever it was called and rehash all these questions. I think this could be an amazing time revisiting these questions. I would like to have had about 4 of them. We could burn up 2 quick hours on this topic in my mind. I thought it was very thought-provoking and very significant and valuable. I think it would be a fun, interesting exercise. As far as our time for tonight goes, Don, you were 2 minutes, 30 seconds. I accidentally gave you the yellow ahead of the green. I don't know if you saw the correction. Great job. Barbara, 3:02. Vicki, 2 minutes, 30 seconds on the nose. EJ, 2:44. Christina, 3:09. Rob Tidd was 3:52. You and I were vying for first there. Patricia was 2:32. Christina and Eric thought I was 2:53 because I think they gave me the opportunity to start after a clarification of the question. I began my timer and ended up with a total of 3:37. I thought everybody used their time wisely and we did very well. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Steve. Christina, on the grammarian role, how did we do with grammar?
Thank you. First, yes, Steve, we did start the timer after you had clarification on your question, giving you the full 3 minutes to respond rather than counting the conversation as part of it. For our word of the day, antecedent, Pat, Rob, Dawn, and I'll incorporate it into our talks. Very good. I got mesmerized by several of the responses neglected to write down outstanding terms till they had gone past my brain and out the other side. But I did get a few. I found us to be egregious free, incidentally. Pat, I like the word fundamentally. Fundamentally, that's a good word. Barbara, broadband access should be like water to your house. Excellent. Vicki, I liked medical marvels and the word spark, the way you used it. Steve, lucid moments. Philosophically substantive. Resting on our laurels. And riding on coattails. All excellent phrases and words. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Barb, how we do on the accounting department?
I think that we did pretty good tonight. I have a confession to make, though. I forgot. So I'm going to just tell Rob, you, Eric, and Christine, perfect evening. Perfect. Thank you. When I remembered I was the counter, I started listening better. Pat had a couple of repeats, but that is it. Steve, I didn't catch anything. So you actually do get a free pass. Lloyd, I just heard a couple of us. Vicki, you had a a so. And Dawn, a couple of so's, a couple of ums, and a one Overall, a really good evening. Thank you. Back to you, Mr.
Thank you, Barbara. Meeting was good again, like we always have. There was everybody stepped in to take a role when it needed to be taken, and every role player explained their roles. Table topics were stellar, and we didn't have any speakers, so Lloyd went ahead and had better lead-ins to questions, and everybody had a chance, and we went 2.5 instead of 1 to 2 minutes, which is excellent also. Don, do you have any questions? Okay. And this, I just enjoy the meetings. We have good camaraderie and a good sense of humor. I am totally enjoying the jokes, and I'm glad that people are stepping up and telling jokes. It's a good way to get some words in too and just practice your delivery. So I would encourage other people to do jokes also. This time I will give the meeting over to our president, Barbara.
Thank you so much. And I would like to ask Lloyd or Vicki or Rob, do we have any announcements tonight? Do we need to repeat anything that was at the meeting that we attended this weekend? Is there anything there that we should be sharing?
Red Lloyd.
Yeah, the one thing that came out, and this is a pretty big one, it doesn't sound like it, but it is. Our district conference is going to be virtual again this year in May something. What's the date, Vicki? Do you remember?
20th and 21st.
Yeah, 20th and 21st of May. And they need some people who are willing to help work the speech contests and the conference in general. Things like introducing speakers, timers, judges, ballot counters, like that. And so if you are interested in doing that, if you'd let either Vicki or I guess me know, we can pass it on to Brenda Pangborn, who is the conference chairperson. These would not be big time, heavy duty obligations, but fairly quick type things.
May I ask Lloyd for clarification? Were they looking for people to participate also in positions at the district level or?
Yes. Thank you for asking. but yeah, there's a constant need for that. The entry point to that is area director, which is, well, several of us in here have done that. But then it's possible to work your way, well, actually up to international president if you chose to do that, I guess. But
Okay, good.
I'm not sure you'd be exhibiting a personality disorder if you did, but in any event, yeah, they are looking for leaders. That there was a shortage this year, as was mentioned at the meeting.
Okay, so if anybody wants to leader, talk to
Yes.
Lloyd.
There are certain requirements if you do want to get into district leadership. You have to have held a club officer role for a certain amount of time. So there are some, but if you're interested, please let me know, because we can get you on the path of higher leadership, because it is rewarding and it's very fun. I found that area director was one of the funnest positions, because you get to go visit other clubs and see how things are done. And I realized that I was very spoiled being my home club of Cascade Speakeasy. And then when I went to other clubs, oh, they're not all like Cascade Speakeasy. And so that was eye-opening, but it was also fun to get to know it. And I look forward to when we can do in-person meetings and trainings again, because it was fun to talk with these people. And as Lloyd has talked before, we only see him maybe twice a year, but the conversations start as though we just talked to him last week. So it's kind of fun to be in that leadership portion. Eric, you were going to put your email address in the chat so that Dawn could email you. Is that correct? Or you've got it? Okay. All right. As long as we've got that. So yeah, anything else? Yes, Christina.
Maureen's address in the chat box as well, a mailing address to send birthday cards to her for her 90th birthday, for those of you who remember her from when she was in club. And send several cards and put different names on them. That'd be kind of fun too. Better guessing on who those cards are from.
The goal is just to get her a pile of them.
Pile of cards, 90 cards, one for each year. There's a long way to go. So break out those cards that you've been saving and get them in the mail.
Thanks for sharing the address too.
Yeah, I'm copying that really quickly. Sorry. Okay, well, it is 6:28, and I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and for participating. Lloyd, I really enjoyed those questions. They were very thought-provoking. You are very good at being leading us in these conversations. So thank you.
Let's say this, though. It would be a good thing for people to sign up for speeches. Several of us in here have done those marathon table topic sessions, and they're not very enjoyable from the table topics master point of view. Let's put it that way. So we need some prepared speeches.
I have a speech all prepared. I just got to get
Tell Rob when you're going to do it.
Just got to get my,
You're gonna do it Monday.
Good. Next Monday for Barbara, Rob.
It's about time that I did my first speech. I know that. I've been dragging my feet. All right. 6:29. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you again.
Good night.
Have a
Good
Good night, everyone.